Takes a three-way to B-way, but a four-way to bust your doorway. Now just imagine how children and parents alike would react seeing these animated characters on the big screen, whether in just the standard presentation or in 3D, IMAX, RPX, or whatever presentation. Perhaps they saw this in 70 millimeter. They were able to see these Disney animated characters saying a line that really children's ears should not hear. But then the parents on the flip side are thinking, well, my children wanted me to see this movie with them, and I wanted to make my children happy. The fruit of my loins, the apple of my eye. How am I going to explain this to them? And then meanwhile, little Susie is looking at her mom, trying to come up with a way to ask, and just finally says, Mommy, what's a four-way? And the mother's like, hamana. Well, it's something that adults do, but nobody has to worry about that. You just pursue your studies, little Susie. And then, in another showing, little Billy hears that line and looks at his dad and says, Daddy, Mommy caught you in a three-way, didn't she? And then Dad would look at him and say, go to your room. But we're in a theater. Go to your room, Billy. Man, the Disney sex education lines, they are just hitting people over the head. What in the world are Disney executives letting by in their animated passion projects? So, Zootopia 2 is the sequel to Zootopia. If you couldn't figure that out with a 2 on the end, really, please, get some goddamn help. Go out and do something. Don't just stuff your turkey. Go out and actually do something and figure out how math works. Also figure out how math works so you don't give everybody goddamn poisoning by not cooking your turkey properly. Yes, seeing this just before Thanksgiving, before all the major cinemas are packed with families. I used to work at a cinema. Theater, as we call it in the States. Don't know why I'm calling it a cinema. I'm not refined like the people in the UK. I used to work, every single goddamn holiday. And boy, Thanksgiving, Christmas were the two busiest days with some of the, rudest goddamn people that you will ever fucking meet. But you won't find rude people in Zootopia 2. You will find, however, a pretty loaded cast. And this was written and directed by Jared Bush, who worked on Moana as well as Encanto, a very underappreciated Disney movie. You may not talk about Bruno, no, but you will talk about Encanto. And also Zootopia, which was a major success in theaters, so that's why we're getting this sequel. I was a bit surprised it took 9 years, but then I thought COVID and all that stuff and all the other projects that Disney was working on, it made sense. It was also, involved Byron Howard, not related to Clint or Ron Howard, at least I don't think so, or Bryce Dallas Howard. Her and her Bob are nowhere near this, so yes, I've sub-referenced a whole bunch. Before talking about Zootopia 2, let me talk about the fact that basically just involves more of the characters that you saw in the first one, but this is an expanded story. We have Jennifer Goodwin returning as Judy Hopps, the rabbit that was able to crack the case and do great things in the first one, and she continues to pursue the criminal underground along with her partner, voiced by Jason Bateman, that is Nick Wilde. The Fox. What does the Fox say? Well, let's get this sequel review on the way, please. We also have Ke Huy Quan, who plays Gary the Snake. Yes, because snakes have not been in Zootopia in 100 years. And we also get various other characters. We get Andy Samberg. We get David Strathairn. I always get that wrong. Idris Elba returning as the chief of police. Shakira returning as whatever she is. Patrick Warburton. I wonder if you can guess who Patrick Warburton voices. Yes, he voices a new mayor, but he's a horse, so he's a mayor. Okay, sorry, bad pun. Let's just move on. Quentin Brunson as a terrific character. Nibbles, Maple Stick, a beaver with a conspiracy podcast. I have to say, magnificent character. Great stuff here. Danny Trejo is in this, and yes, even CM Punk and Roman Reigns, who were rivals and are now buddies. Heading into WWE Survivor Series War Games as of this recording. That has not happened yet. They are the Z Bros. And even Jean Renault and various people. Bonnie Hunt is back in this as Judy Hopps' mother. So yeah, really loaded cast. The first Zootopia was fine enough. It was a nice thing about, pursuing your dreams, not letting differences basically cast you aside, appreciating the differences among people, and making sure that you can bring people together. And it was a nice, sweet message with some good animation. The sloth stuff was pretty funny. But to me, I thought Zootopia was good. I didn't necessarily think it deserved a sequel because I was like, okay, whatever, it was what it was. But it made a fuck ton of money at the box office, and Disney is able to print money more often than not with their animated projects, releasing this right after the equally crowd-pleasing Wicked for Good, at least for others, not for me. Check out my Wicked for Good trailer review, and you will see what I mean. But Zootopia 2, seeing the trailer for it, I was like, okay, this looks somewhat humorous. I think it could work, and I like the idea that they didn't. Besides the snake stuff, excuse me, they didn't give away a lot. They didn't give away a lot of, what's actually going on. It's just snakes. Had not been in Zootopia for so long. Why is the snake back here? Ki Hui Huan was perfect to include in this. He added a whole lot more depth to this cast than I expected. And nothing against the other characters, the other actors, but the inclusion of him, Quinta Brunson, and a few others really did help elevate this cast compared to the other, even though there were some talents there. So, how is Zootopia 2 in comparison to Zootopia 1? That's what everybody wants to know. That's what everybody has clicked on this video. Not everybody. It's much better than the first one. Like, leagues better. I gave the first one a B grade and 3.5 stars, and this is goddamn good. This is exactly the type of way you expand on a sequel. You show more lands, you show more characters, you up the stakes, you make it seem like where characters could be put in danger. You had more heart to the film, more heart than I expected. Didn't actually expect this to get to me like it did. I'm not saying it made me cry, but it made me feel for the characters a whole lot more than I expected. I like the building between Hopps and Wilde. I like the therapy session that they showed in the trailer. And Gary's backstory and everything was really, really nice. And also, there's just more good stuff with this. And the pursuits, the action scenes, the humor actually really works. There's a lot of Easter eggs in this that I'll talk about in the spoilers. But this really is a terrific goddamn sequel. I was very, very surprised that I ended up enjoying this more than the first one, because I thought it might be kind of on the line, maybe a little bit better, but I was seeing the reviews from critics and audiences alike where this is better than the other one. And it really is. I thought the characters flowed a whole lot better. I thought the story flowed a whole lot better. Sure, there are some familiar beats and cliches, but it really does end up, being the perfect expansion of the first one, and I'm even on board with seeing Zootopia 3, which I didn't expect to say going into Zootopia 2. I was actually also very surprised that there were like 20 to 25 people at a 10:05 showing. I worked late, decided to go watch it last minute, and was like, okay, let me just give it a shot. Glad I did, because I got to avoid the crowd, but very, very good stuff. Really good, work on the characters and everything. Nice pacing. And upping the stakes and adding more depth really did help this film. So I'm going to get into spoilers. In theaters right now, if you want to check it out, 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So, we started with a brief recap of them busting Merriweather, I believe was her name. That was voiced by Jenny Slate. A very gifted and gorgeous Jenny Slate, I do want to say. And very funny Jenny Slate. So, the sheep that was the mayor's aide, that kind of stuff. And basically, now, others are in jail. Hopps and Wilde are doing what they can. I did kind of laugh at Punk and Roman Joe Anawahi for, his given name, but Roman Reigns and CM Punk, I don't know them as actual people. But you only know them as as wrestling characters. The Zebros, that was kind of funny. I mean, they get a few, little bits, not much. And while trying to just observe this one, like criminal bit of activity taking place on the dock, there's this anteater. I think it's an anteater. Oh, she's an anteater. You're welcome. You'll never unhear that song. Judy ends up almost causing a major issue. There was like a pursuit in a Malibu getaway car and everything, which was, I kind of just laughed at like the pink, car, and the fact that there was this nice pursuit and there's this character Ebenezer Linksley that that had this journal, this weather journal, and that's how they were always able to predict the weather properly and everything. It was a template also to build Zootopia, and there was always rain, sun, winter. It was all 4 seasons and stuff like that. Basically, our weather is everything because Zootopia is a big old land, and basically they crash into the statue of Ebenezer. And now, basically, things aren't going all that well. There's these 2 warthogs, or boars, rather, that are cops. There's these 2 hippos that are cops. You'll recognize these characters from the first one. But basically, the only way they can stay together as partners is if they go to this Partners in Crisis thing. There's like this armadillo and this bear, which is kind of funny. And also an elephant and a mouse. This named Clark that doesn't talk, just squeaks and raises its hands. And Judy is a little more overbearing. She answers all this stuff and says, notice how she said all this stuff and didn't give him a chance to say anything, and she thumps her foot when she gets nervous and she's trying to stop her foot. It's little things like that that actually work in this. And we then basically get them, having to do this Partners in Crisis therapy stuff, so to speak. They got to study on this, figure out their differences, make it so they're better partners. But then we see, more stuff about they're finding snakeskin. That's what they found in the bottom or in the back of that van, and the snake was transported to, basically do something. There's the Linksley Journal. The idea is they feel that somebody's going to try to steal that thing because there's a reason why that's going to happen. Obviously, otherwise it would be a pretty pointless plot. So, while dressing up and trying to get into this thing, even though they're supposed to not be doing any cases, they manage to crack the case because they see this snake all up there kind of dressed like fucking Red Riding Hood. And meanwhile, Judy ends up meeting Poppert, who is voiced by Andy Samberg. Very well, by the way. And essentially, he's kind of the outcast of the Linksley family. And the Linksleys are very, very powerful. They also are major crime bosses and have gone to, basically expanding their land, Tundra Town, and wanting to make sure that they snuff out any different animals. And that's where Gary the Snake comes in. He basically ends up getting the journal and gets away while all this stuff's falling around and all this stuff's colliding. Really good chase scene, by the way. It's somebody on a motorcycle, one of those 2-seaters with a sidecar, takes Gary away, and now all of a sudden, we basically get Judy and, we get Hops and Wilde pursuing. They end up basically in the crosshairs when Gary ends up accidentally biting the police chief. And that leads them down a bit of a path where now they're being pursued because they're seen as, cops that have gone rogue. So now they're being, pursued by the Zootopia police force. But it turns out Gary is not actually that bad of a guy, but he's got to prove that. Because again, nobody's seen a snake in Zootopia for a bit, 100 years. Nobody knows why. And we find out why a little bit later. It's basically they've been blacklisted, pushed out, that kind of stuff. But while Hops and Wilde are trying to figure this stuff out, they're also trying to work on their differences and everything. Wilde is too, not standoffish necessarily, but he uses his humor as a coping mechanism and his defense mechanism. They end up having to try to figure out a way to pursue a reptile. And they end up going through this marshland area where they actually end up having to get the help of Nibbles Maplestick, Quinta Brunson. Terrific, by the way. Very, very humorous. It actually leads to the funniest bit that I saw in the movie, where they need to go across the water, and here's a walrus, cuckoo, cuckoo, and has a fish, for him, but he comes up, is like, hey bub, it's like blah, 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 just doing that, and it's so stupid, but it's so funny, because it's got that Disney magic, that Disney spin to it. It really works, shockingly. And they end up floating on the walrus's belly like an old steamship, and then they mention something about an anniversary. I think it's a work anniversary, but it's like, oh, it's your anniversary. Turns on these lights, and it's like all this stuff. He's got all this shit set up, and I don't know why it's so funny. But they're going to this old wrecked ship area where they need to find, somebody that's voiced by Danny Trejo. Jesus, basically. And Wilde lets it slip that he is terrified of reptiles, basically. He has some issue with reptiles. And you would think Judy would also, considering she's a rabbit, but she sees no difference in people. And they basically, the only thing that is told to them is, you gotta eat. Not eating is a sign of disrespect. So they end up going to this place that's guarded by a turtle shell. And they end up, it's a bunch of reptiles, so Wilde's freaked out. Hops is trying to figure out this thing about this journal, because they have this journal, and they're trying to figure out more of what's going on. Meanwhile, Gary and his partner, as it were, if you get it, you get it, basically Gary is trying to prove the innocence of snakes. That's what he's doing, and that will lead them back to having the journal here in a bit. And they talk to Jesus. Danny Trejo's actually pretty funny here as a lizard. And they gotta eat these grubs, these worms. So they do, and then he's like, ha, they ate it. You get it. And Quinta Brunson, by the way, terrific here. Again, I cannot put over just how hilarious she is. They end up basically getting pursued by the cops, because the cops tracked them. Because one thing that factors in is the phone is the first thing that they track. So, Judy's phone was smashed. And by the way, the reason they end up in Marshland and end up with Miss Maplestick is they ran into Mr. Big, who helped them, the little mouse Godfather reference thing, that kind of stuff. That led them to basically, talk to him, the daughter, the granddaughter. There was also one little earlier thing where they were running through a kitchen, and there was a lion as a chef, and took off the hat, and there's a rat up there. Ratatouille, do you get it? I mean, that was a cute reference. I'll give it that. And they're basically just rolling along. They end up finally running into Gary. They actually end up finding him after going through this marshland pipe. And they end up actually almost running out of air. Wilde manages to save Hops just before, and they end up in what's basically amounts to like Switzerland. Ricola, there's a couple of these goats. Switzerland or Sweden or whatever the hell it is. I think it's supposed to be Switzerland. But they end up having to climb up to this old honeymoon lodge that has a bit of a thing for, it's a bit of a hideout for snakes. She finds some evidence, some newspaper clippings and stuff like that, and pictures. And it turns out that there was a whole, land for snakes. And it's been snuffed out because it turns out the Lynxleys have been doing this and snuffing them out. They want to snuff out marshland. They want to continue to take over that stuff and eventually maybe take over Zootopia. But they can't prove this without evidence, so boom, boom. they end up running into Gary, who actually has Pompert as his accomplice, shall we say. He doesn't like his family and just wants to do good. And essentially, we end up with Wilde and Hops being separated when they manage to save Hops, but Wilde gets captured. And the reason that the police are able to be right on their tails, ironically, is because the police are kind of being pushed by the Lynx Ladies because, yeah, they stole something from us. It's our thing. It actually turns out that Gary is able, because he's a heat snake, this kind of stuff they sense with heat. There was this fire that they use when him and Pompert and whatever go to this far-off Dubai desert land while Wilde is in jail. And, Maple Stick is also in jail and manages to free Wilde actually pretty quickly. Ki Hui Huan, by the way, magnificent. Once again, in this, really does seem genuine. Just wants to do good. We will succeed. We will be successful. He's trying to find out basically where his old land is. His old mother's is like this old part of this land. And the reason is because that journal is actually the journal of his great-grandmother. The great-grandfather, Ebenezer, cut out the patent, put his own patent there, forging it, and basically making it like he is the big hoopah and whatever. And I don't think that's actually the right Grandpoomba. That's what I was trying to say. So he's trying to make sure that, his grandmother's name is cleared and that snakes aren't all that bad and all this and everything, because the journal's a way to bring Zootopia together, create Zootopia, whatever. A little bit of a messy plot. But while that's going on, Wilde and, Maple Stick get freed. But inadvertently, they end up releasing all the prisoners. By they, I mean Wilde, even Merriweather. And there's actually some funny stuff, where they all get away. And Wilde's not sure how they're going to get there unless they know the fastest driver in all of, Zootopia. And there we have Flash, a.k.a. the sloth that, did the speeding thing before, and the telling of the joke at the DMV type deal, that kind of thing, that character. He manages to get him just to this Dubai desert thing, and basically they have to go to this area through this festival. Hops, Pompert, and Gary, they have to go through, they have to get into this building, they have to flip this old switch that will light this lighthouse, and they will be able, in English, to get to his old house because it's buried under all this snow. But they'll see the lighthouse because apparently lighthouses never get buried in anything. So while that's going on, the police are about to shoot Hops with a poison arrow, or one of them, or like a poison dart, and Hops gets in the way, but just when it looks like it's about to hit her, and I was actually worried it was going to, boom, the car gets there, stops the dart, just sticks in there, and Flash takes off. And now we have Nibbles trying to get Gary in the door because the door got, jammed, and gets him in just before all this weird weather shit is going on. I don't know why the thing had so many heat deck things, but by the way, the festival was Burning Mammal. I can appreciate that. And it seems like Hops and Gary and Pompert are about to do it, and then suddenly, and Pompert basically, it screws him over with some venom. And also there was this anti-venom pen that was voiced by the woman the young lady that voiced Moana. I cannot pronounce her name for the life of me. I also cannot believe that I believe she's going to play Moana in the new movie, I think. I don't necessarily know, but good on her. I mean, it was a hilarious, voice for an EpiPen anti-venom thing that was the snake. That was funny. But Gary's thrown out in the cold, and because he's a warm weather animal, he's not doing all that great. And he's like, just stuck out the door, but they didn't slam the door because I guess he had to slide back in. But Judy is not doing well. She's giving into the poison. And he has a little fanny pack thing, but the fanny pack deal gets taken by Poppert, and Gary's about to get, Gary's about to basically get, basically about to freeze to death. Wilde is about to get destroyed because he doesn't know quite yet that Poppert is a bad guy. He also manages to stick Maple Stick with some poison, but she is not done yet because we can't actually have characters die in these movies, but they put him in some good, mortal danger. Because it seems like Hobbs is about to die. Like, she wanted to do it, but she's given into it. And suddenly Gary gives her a big old hug with heat, which just keeps her alive long enough. But then the police show up. It's like, he's going to try to eat that snake. No, I'm trying to save her. Da, 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 da. And then Wilde and Poppert are on this, like, ice shelf thing that's about to fall over. And basically, he's trying to stick him with it. He's not very good at this because he's kind of a nerd. And Wilde manages to basically kick a bunch of stuff over, and then manages to kick the anti-venom over to Gary. And then the ice is cracking. It looks like shit. They're about to go. And Judy manages to get stuck with the anti-venom. And instantly, it's like Mega Man's energy tank. I mean, she is right up, gets up there just as the ice show's falling. Boom! She manages to get Wilde. Thanks for giving me anxiety. Why am I getting anxiety over a cartoon fox and a cartoon rabbit? But manages to save him. And Popper seemingly falls to his death. He actually doesn't fall to his death. But during all this, there's a confession thing finally where they confess their feelings for each other and this kind of stuff. And then they realize that they have to go and go to the old house, the grandmother's house, great-grandmother's house, and get the old patent before Popper decides to burn the whole thing to the ground. But it's sweet and it's endearing. And why am I feeling... Well, help me, I'm feeling... Why are things working in this movie a lot better than the first one? Not that the first one was bad. So they they managed to get on, ski mobiles, snowmobiles, that's the term. And they managed to get to the great-grandmother's house. They managed to get the patent. But then Poppert shows up, and he is about to do something. But there was a hilarious moment, by the way. It takes a 3-way to B-way, but it takes a 4-way to bust your doorway. Because Maple Stick, chewed through the goddamn door. Why would we need to know about a 4-way? But I digress. What's just great about all this, though, is there's just a sense of adventure and breeziness about it. Even though I think it's a few minutes longer than the first one, it doesn't feel that way. And they managed to save the patent, but then suddenly... the fire is going because, Poppert had thrown that, but then he got knocked out with something, and they managed to save everything, and everything was good. Snakes are seen as equal. I did like with Patrick Warburton trying to make puns. You could instantly tell his voice. There are others that can kind of mask it. You can't mask Patrick Warburton's voice. But saving the day, Wilde and Hobbs basically, come to an agreement, a unity, shall we say. Really good stuff here. Really good dialogue. Really appreciate the feeling of friendship and even love, possibly. I don't know why that worked. But, snakes are seen as equal. The Linksley family are taken to jail. Merriweather, meanwhile, has escaped and is about to escape to another land when basically Wilde and Hobbs happen to see her and then bust out of their disguises, and that's where we end Zootopia 2. Fun. Zootopia 2 was a lot of fun, with a lot more heart and a lot more humor than I expected. A+. Didn't expect to say that. Didn't expect this review to go as long as it did, but had some things to talk about. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritland. Until we revisit the animal kingdom again, happy trails to you.